Juniper Sinclair's heels clicked sharply on the worn wooden floor of their late mother's townhouse. She had barely stepped through the doorway when she saw him, Alan, sitting on the sofa with his head in his hands, shoulders trembling. The house smelled of old memories and stress. She hadn't been here in months. "What happened?" she asked, dropping her bag with a thud. Alan didn't answer right away. She crossed her arms. "You've got 60 seconds before I walk out and never look back." He slowly raised his head. His eyes were bloodshot. "I need you to marry Walter Thorne." Then she laughed, hard, bitter. "Okay, how much have you had to drink? And what did you mix it with?" Alan didn't even flinch. "I'm serious." "Obviously." She looked him over. "You look like death. Are you on something?" He stood shakily, walked to a drawer, and retrieved a single sheet of paper. "Just read this." She hesitated, then took it. Her name, Walter Thorne's name, legal language, a 1-year strategic marriage agreement. Terms laid out like a corporate acquisition, bullet points, clauses, legalese. Her hands trembled. "You forged my signature?" Alan shook his head. "No, it's just a draft. He's waiting on your consent." "He, Walter Thorne, your cold-blooded billionaire boss? Why would he want me?" Alan looked away. "Because you're the only person who won't let him manipulate them. And because—" She folded her arms. "Say it. He wants to own you." Juniper's nostrils flared. "Excuse me?" Alan swallowed. "Not like that. Okay, maybe it is like that, but it's more complicated. He's in trouble with the press. Some donors pulled out after that anonymous leak. He needs optics. Clean ones. You're smart, articulate, you've stayed out of scandals, and conveniently I'm your sister. Junie, please." Alan's voice cracked. "If I don't fix this, I'm done. They'll strip me of the committee seat. The campaign is already bleeding money. Walter offered to clean it all up. Press, donors, everything. He said you're the condition. Like I'm property," she snapped. Alan winced. "No, like you're the one person who makes him pause. He thinks he can't control you. That excites him." Juniper narrowed her eyes. "And you were okay selling me off for that?" "I didn't sell you. You just served me up, gift wrapped in a white dress and a broken spine." Alan ran a shaky hand through his hair. "Don't you think I tried every other option? This was the only one that didn't end with me in prison or splashed across headlines." She folded the paper in half, then again, until it was no bigger than a playing card. "I'm not doing this." Alan stepped forward. "Junie, no. Absolutely not. I don't care how much trouble you're in. I'm not walking into a political masquerade to save your career." Silence stretched between them. Then Alan spoke, barely above a whisper. "Mom would have done it. That cut her deeper than any contract." Juniper took a step back, her throat tight. "Don't bring her into this. She protected us. She sacrificed for us every day. This is 1 year. You survive it, and you come out richer, stronger, and with your brother's career still intact. I didn't ask to be your savior, Alan. But you are," he said. "You always have been." 2 days later, she found herself at a private legal office in DuPont Circle, signing her name on that contract. No emotion, no fanfare, just the scratch of pen on paper and Walter Thorne, watching her from across the table. He was dressed in charcoal, not a speck out of place. His hands immaculate, his eyes steel. He didn't smile, not even when she slid the document across the table. "I'll have my team schedule the ceremony," he said simply. "You're not even going to pretend this is romantic?" Walter tilted his head. "We both know what this is." She stood. "No, Walter. You know what this is. I'm just here to keep my brother out of a jail cell." He rose slowly. "We'll see." 2 weeks later, she stood at the altar in a white gown that fit too tight and heels that made her toes scream. The press was there. Political donors, senators, fundraisers, campaign chairs. Walter Thorne stood across from her, cold and majestic, as if he were about to acquire a new firm instead of take a wife. The judge recited the vows. Juniper said "I do" with a tight jaw. Walter didn't kiss her. He nodded. She could feel the cameras on her, flashing like tiny explosions. The ring on her finger felt like a trap, 3 emeralds clawed in platinum. When they stepped into the limousine afterward, silence thickened between them. Walter sipped something dark from a crystal glass. She kept her eyes on the window. Then finally, he spoke. "Do you know what I find most intriguing about you?" She didn't respond. He turned toward her. You haven't begged yet. Hello, my beautiful family. This is your favorite Dr. Phillips, and I'm so glad you're still here with me. If you're with me right now, drop a comment below saying, I am with you, doctor. Your words mean so much. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Join our growing love and Twilight family today. The wedding made headlines before it even happened. Walter Thorne marries campaign strategist's sister in quiet ceremony amid Senate pressure scandal turned spectacle. Thorne's unexpected union with Juniper Sinclair, but there was nothing quiet about it. The ballroom of the old State Heritage Club was draped in navy, silver, and frost white. No flowers, no violins, just power suits, cold champagne, and men with polished smiles. Juniper stood in a waiting room lined with antique portraits of dead senators, breathing slowly through her nose while the stylist pinned her hair. Ready, Mrs. Thorne? Someone asked. She turned her head sharply. That's not my name. The planner gave an awkward laugh and retreated. The dress was Walter's pick. No lace, no romance. Sleek, high-necked, with sharp shoulders and a fitted waist, like armor. When the doors opened, she walked down the aisle to the soft march of a string quartet. Walter was already at the altar, hands folded, face blank. He didn't look at her. Not once. She walked past senators, lobbyists, CEOs, and political influencers, each of them whispering theories behind composed expressions. He's rebranding himself. She's the one with the clean public image. Smart move. Strategic. Juniper's throat burned. She reached the front and met the gaze of the judge officiating the ceremony. He read from a printed script with the mechanical tone of a man billing by the hour. Do you, Juniper Sinclair, take Walter Thorne as your lawfully wedded husband? I do, she said without blinking. He turned to Walter. Do you, Walter Thorne? I do. The judge looked briefly confused. You may kiss the bride. Walter didn't move. Juniper stared straight ahead. After a beat, the judge cleared his throat and closed the folder. By the authority vested in me by the District of Columbia. The crowd clapped politely. She didn't cry, didn't smile, didn't falter. She walked back down the aisle with Walter beside her, his arm around hers like a business escort. Smile, he whispered. You first, she murmured back. The car waiting outside was a long black town car, tinted windows and diplomatic plates. Juniper climbed in first. Walter followed. As the driver pulled off, she stared out the window, peeling off her gloves finger by finger. This dress itches, she said flatly. Then take it off, he replied without looking at her. She scoffed. Is that your idea of flirting? No, he said. That's my idea of honesty. She turned. You really think you've won something here? He looked over at her finally. You think I care about winning? You care about control, she snapped. And now you have me in your little power grid. You came willingly. I came because my brother was too arrogant to cover his tracks. You exploited that. Walter sipped from the glass beside him. Correct. Her spine stiffened. You're not even trying to pretend otherwise? There's no need to pretend. You wanted transparency. This is what it looks like. She blinked. You're sick. He leaned in just slightly, enough that she could feel the weight of his attention. You're the one who said yes, Juniper. You read every word of the contract. It wasn't a contract. It was a setup. Perhaps. He tilted his head. But here you are, still wearing my ring. She glanced down. 3 sharp emeralds, pointed like talons, sat inside platinum claws on her finger. It looked more like a crown than a promise. Cold, calculated. I hate emeralds, she muttered. He raised a brow. I know. Back at the estate, Juniper walked through the grand marble entrance like a stranger entering an art gallery, one where nothing was allowed to be touched. No staff, no welcoming champagne, no smile from the man beside her. Just silence. The driver disappeared down a hallway. Juniper kicked off her heels in the foyer, letting them clatter against the tiles. I'm going to need wine. A whole bottle. Walter was already removing his cufflinks. Cabernet is on the sideboard, the one from Burgundy. Don't insult me by asking for anything sweet. Don't worry. She walked toward the bar. There's nothing sweet about today. She poured without asking. 1 glass for her, none for him. You really don't drink on wedding days? I don't celebrate acquisitions. Lovely, she said, sipping slowly. So this is what a $1 billion prison looks like. Walter chuckled quietly. Call it what you want. You'll still sleep in my bed. She turned, eyes flashing. Excuse me? You heard me. No separate rooms, no guest suite. He stepped closer. Why delay the inevitable? Juniper didn't back down. Because I don't belong to you. His voice dropped. Not yet. She tensed. He unbuttoned the top of his shirt, revealing a glimpse of chest. Clean lines, hard muscle, a scar just beneath his collarbone. She hated how her eyes lingered. I'm not afraid of you, she said coldly. You should be afraid of what I make you feel, he replied. A long, still pause. I'll sleep wherever I damn well choose, she said. Walter walked past her, his fingers brushing her waist lightly as he passed. Barely a touch, but enough to leave a pulse. My room has the better sheets. Later that night, she stood in front of the double doors of the master suite. She could hear the silence on the other side. No music, no laughter, no celebration, just waiting. She pressed her forehead against the wood. 1 year, she whispered to herself. Just 1 damn year, and she turned the handle. The bedroom door closed with a soft final click behind her. Juniper stood still. The master suite was dim, lit only by the faint glow of recessed ceiling lights. No candles, no flowers, no pretense. Just a bed, wide, low, perfectly made in dark linen, and Walter standing. Beside it, removing his watch like it was just another night. I assumed you'd go to a guest room, he said without turning. I changed my mind. Convenient. She took a breath. Don't flatter yourself. I just refuse to let you dictate where I sleep. Now he looked at her. Slowly. Directly. That's not all you've refused tonight. Juniper walked toward the foot of the bed and stopped. You expect something from me? No. He took a step closer. But I want it. She crossed her arms. Want doesn't equal permission. Walter's lips barely moved. Then give it to me. A long pause. She hated how her skin flushed. The man before her was a machine by reputation, calculated, cold, impenetrable. But now, standing only a few feet away, shirt unbuttoned to the waist, his chest, rising and falling with more tension than control, he was something else entirely. Juniper didn't respond with words. She reached behind and pulled the zipper of her dress. It hissed down her spine. The fabric slid off her shoulders, puddling around her ankles with a soft whisper. She stood there in nothing but black lace and defiance. This means nothing, she said. Walter stepped forward until his breath was warm on her skin. It means everything. Then his mouth crashed against hers. There was nothing slow about the kiss, no gentleness, no caution. He kissed her like he wanted to dismantle her, piece by piece. Juniper's back hit the nearest wall. Her hands tangled in his open shirt, fingers clawing at his chest. He tore his sleeves off, buttons flying. Her nails dragged down his torso, and he grunted, low, sharp, like she'd cracked something open inside him. She didn't hold back, didn't hesitate. She didn't want soft. She wanted control, and she wanted to take it from him. But Walter didn't give control. He took it. He spun her, pressed her chest to the wall, one hand pinning her wrist, the other tracing the curve of her hip. You could say no, he whispered into her ear. Her answer was a breathless moan. He lifted her easily, effortless, like she weighed nothing, and walked her to the bed. She wrapped her legs around his waist, her fingers in his hair, pulling, biting. She expected cold. What she got was fire. Walter undressed her with practiced movements, but the look in his eyes wasn't detached. It was ravenous, starved. He watched every reaction she gave him, memorizing it like data, but responding to it like a man possessed. When he finally entered her, there was no pause, just one strong, deliberate thrust. Juniper cried out, arching into him. He didn't let up. Each motion was deliberate, relentless, calculated to undo her. His hands gripped her thighs, his teeth grazed her neck, his body pinned. Hers like she was something precious, but something dangerous. You were made for this. He growled into her ear. You're delusional, she gasped, digging her nails into his back. Say it again, he demanded, thrusting deeper. She bit her lip. You're God, insufferable. He thrust again. Keep talking. She couldn't. Her body shook with each rhythm. Her breath broke against his skin. Her moans slipped past her lips before she could trap them. Walter kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, like he needed more than her body, like he needed her soul. When she came, it wasn't just pleasure. It was surrender. She clawed at his back, her body arching beneath him, and he groaned as if the sound shattered him. He followed seconds later, burying himself deep, his forehead pressed to hers, breath ragged. And then, in a voice so low it barely touched the air, Juniper. No title, no walls, just her name. Like a confession. The room was quiet, except for their breaths. Walter didn't move, neither did she. Their bodies tangled in sweat and sheets and silence. Finally, Juniper reached for the edge of the blanket and pulled it over herself. Was this part of the contract too? She asked. Walter didn't open his eyes. You tell me. She rolled onto her side. You've got serious control issues. I know. You're addicted to power. He cracked one eye open. Only when it's worth it. She stared at the ceiling. I wasn't supposed to enjoy that. And yet. She threw a pillow at him. He caught it, grinning faintly. It was the first time she'd seen a real expression on his face. Not a smirk, not a mask, just something human. Walter reached for the glass of water on the nightstand, took a sip, then offered it to her. She didn't take it. Instead, she looked at him, really looked. No cameras? She asked. No staff, no recording devices, no leverage. Why? He shrugged. I didn't want proof. She frowned. Of what? That you could break me? Morning sunlight slipped through the sheer curtains, landing across Juniper's bare shoulder. She blinked. The sheets smelled like cedar and sex. Her body ached in ways she hadn't expected, deep, sore, and completely alive. She sat up slowly, pulling the blanket with her, scanning the room. No sign of him. For a second, she thought it had all been some fever dream. Then the door opened. Walter walked in, crisp and clean in a white button-down, sleeves rolled, collar slightly undone. No tie. He carried 2 mugs. Juniper narrowed her eyes. If you say good morning, wife, I will throw this lamp at your head. He set 1 mug on her side of the bed without flinching. Black, nobelium sugar. You take it like a sociopath. She blinked. How do you know that? Walter sipped his own mug. Your Capitol Hill intern bio, staffer's gossip, coffee orders travel. So you researched my coffee preferences before we even... She gestured to the bed. He cut her off. I research everything. Why stop at caffeine? She took the mug, held it in both hands, and stared at him. You're disturbingly calm for someone who just committed a felony with his wife. He arched a brow. Last night was not criminal. It should be. Careful. His voice lowered, just slightly. You're tempting me to commit it again. She sipped her coffee, watching him. You're not what I expected, she said. And you're exactly what I feared. They ate breakfast in silence on the balcony. Fresh croissants, eggs, berries. Juniper wore one of his oversized white shirts, sleeves rolled to her elbows. Walter read the paper, flipping pages with surgical precision. She let the silence stretch, sipping her second coffee. So what now? She asked finally. He glanced up. What do you mean? I mean, are we supposed to parade around town pretending to be in love? Or are we just avoiding each other and hoping the paparazzi never catches wind of the icicles in our marriage bed? Walter folded the paper neatly. You assume last night was a fluke. She met his eyes. Wasn't it? No, he said. It was the start of something I plan to repeat. Frequently. She nearly choked on her croissant. You're bold for a man with commitment issues. I don't have commitment issues. I have trust issues. Very different. Juniper rolled her eyes. You're charming in a sociopathic kind of way. Better than being forgettable. Is that what this is about? She asked. You're scared of being forgotten, so you marked me like territory. Walter leaned back, resting one arm on the chair beside him. You don't mark something unless you believe someone else might try to take it. There was a pause. A tension. Juniper broke it with a soft laugh. You're worse than I thought. And yet you slept like the dead, because I was used like a stress doll. He smirked. You responded rather enthusiastically for a doll. She threw a grape at him. He caught it midair, popped it in his mouth, and chewed. Later that morning she showered and stepped out into the master closet, only to find him waiting. Are you stalking me in my own dressing room? He held up a box. Your official press wardrobe has arrived. Excuse me? For public appearances, Charity galas, fundraisers, will be photographed together. Optics matter. She opened the box. Designer labels, red carpet cuts, shoes worth more than her first car. You think this buys my cooperation? I think it ensures you won't embarrass me in front of donors. She smirked. Don't worry. You're already an embarrassment. He stepped closer. Too close. You still smell like me, he said, gaze dropping to her collarbone. Juniper's breath caught. She hated how fast her pulse raced. You think just because you got under my skin? I didn't just get under it, he murmured. I branded it. Her hand flew up to push him away, but he caught her wrist. You can fight it all you want, Juniper, but I know what I felt, and I know what you screamed. Let me go. He didn't. Say it meant nothing, and I will. She stared at him, furious. He waited. Seconds passed. Then she yanked free and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. That afternoon, a reporter caught them leaving the estate. Walter's hand slid around her waist like muscle memory. Cameras clicked. Juniper turned her head slightly, whispering through clenched teeth. You don't get to touch me in public if you can't be honest in private. He smiled for the cameras. You'll find I'm very honest behind closed doors. Click. Click. Flash. Someone shouted, Mr. Thorne, is this marriage a rebrand or a love story? Walter didn't miss a beat. He pulled Juniper in, pressed a kiss to her temple, and answered calmly, It's a damn good story either way. Back inside, she shoved him once they were alone. Don't use me. He stared her down. Then stop pretending you hate being used. I do. No, Juniper. You hate not being in control. That's different. She opened her mouth to retort, but nothing came out. He walked away, tossing his jacket on the chair. We'll be at the city council charity dinner tomorrow. Wear the silver one. She narrowed her eyes. What if I wear red instead? His voice was soft. I dare you. The boardroom at Thorne International was always 10 minutes early and 2 degrees too cold. Walter was 15 minutes late. Again, his assistant shifted nervously beside the digital projector. The CFO cleared his throat. 2 senators' aides exchanged glances. Then the door swung open. Walter strode in like he owned the air, which in this room, he did. But something was off. His shirt was unbuttoned at the throat, sleeves rolled, not his usual composed armor. His tie was missing. He dropped into the head seat. Apologies, he muttered. Someone passed him a report. He didn't read it. His phone buzzed on the table. He glanced down. A photo. Juniper in bed, tangled in white sheets, biting her lip. She'd sent it 5 minutes ago. Walter exhaled slowly, his grip tightening around the device. Sir, his assistant began. We need direction on the senatorial liaison proposal. Walter stared at the phone a beat longer, then locked the screen. I don't care about the liaison proposal. Table it. But, I said, table it. Silence. Everyone nodded. That night, he returned home earlier than expected. Juniper was on the floor in the living room, barefoot in leggings and a sweatshirt, reading a binder full of ethics committee proposals. She didn't look up when he entered. I've never met a billionaire with worse time management. He smirked. You're the reason I'm behind on everything. She flipped a page. I'm flattered. Don't be. It's not a compliment. Juniper turned, eyebrows raised. Then why are you staring at me like you forgot how to blink? He crossed the room in 3 long strides and snatched the binder from her hands. Because I can't concentrate when you're this close to me. She leaned back on her elbows. Sounds like a personal problem. Walter dropped to his knees between her legs. No, he said. It's a you problem. They didn't make it to the bedroom. He took her right there on the Persian rug, devouring every sound she made like he needed it to breathe. His hands on her hips, her nails in his back, the fire roaring behind them, the only witness. Afterward, she lay with her cheek against his chest, heart still racing. You skipped your briefing today, she whispered. I rescheduled it. You're obsessed, she said. Walter didn't argue. The next day, the headlines noticed. Thorne cancels fundraiser last minute. Strategy or personal crisis? Billionaire CEO ditches diplomatic briefing. New bride to blame? Juniper turned her phone screen toward him. You're tanking your own optics. Walter didn't glance up from his coffee. Let them speculate. You care about power. I care about you. She blinked. That wasn't part of the script. He stood, kissed her on the forehead, and walked out. That evening, at a gala they were both expected to attend, Juniper arrived alone. Photographers swarmed. "Where's Mr. Thorne?" someone asked. She smiled tightly. Tied up. Literally, she thought. He'd handcuffed her to the headboard less than 2 hours ago. Walter arrived an hour late, no tie, no apology. The chairman of the council was already in mid-speech. Instead of sliding into the VIP row, Walter walked straight to Juniper, standing at the back of the ballroom in a black gown with a plunging neckline. He didn't speak. He grabbed her wrist, pulled her into the nearest hallway. "What the hell?" He pushed her against the marble wall. "You wore that on purpose," he growled into her ear. "And you liked it," she whispered back. "You think I won't take you right here?" She tilted her chin. "Try me." He did. 10 minutes later, she straightened her gown and walked back into the ballroom, cheeks flushed, hair slightly undone. Walter followed seconds after, adjusting his cuffs. The council chairman stared. Walter nodded like nothing had happened and took his seat. The next day, Juniper found herself waiting. He didn't show up to breakfast, didn't respond to her texts. By noon, she checked his calendar. Cleared. Evening, cleared. Walter Thorne, master of punctuality and control, was disappearing into her. And it scared her, because she was disappearing too. She found him in his office library at midnight, sitting in the dark, staring at a framed photo on the desk, one of him shaking hands with the president years ago. "You're spiraling," she said gently. He didn't flinch. "I've lost meetings, skipped calls, canceled with donors." She stepped closer. "Why?" Walter's voice was low. "Because the minute I'm not near you, I feel like I'm being pulled under." She blinked. "That's not love, Walter." "I know." His jaw clenched. "It's need." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then pull back." He looked up at her. "I can't." Juniper stood in front of the mirror in the master bathroom, brushing her hair back into a loose twist. Her reflections stared back, calm, collected, indifferent, but her heart hadn't stopped pounding since the night before. She could still feel him, on her skin, under it, inside it. And she hated it, because it wasn't supposed to feel good. It wasn't supposed to feel like home. She dropped the brush, walked into the closet, and pulled on jeans and a black blouse. No designer tags, no styling team. She needed to feel like herself today. Whoever that still was. Walter was already in the kitchen. No staff again. No calls, just him, slicing apples like he didn't have 3 appointments waiting on his word. "You're late," she said, pouring herself coffee. "I canceled everything," he replied. She stared. "Again?" He handed her a plate with apples and toast. "You didn't eat dinner last night." "Because you were too busy dragging me against walls and forgetting you have a job." Walter didn't react. She took the plate. Sat. "You're spiraling," she said. He leaned against the counter. "You said that, and you're not denying it." He took a breath. "I'm not." Juniper looked at him. Not the tailored image or political warlord. Just the man. Barefoot, wrinkled shirt, eyes tired. "I don't want to be your escape," she said. "You're not." "Then what am I?" Walter walked around the island, knelt in front of her. "You're the only thing in my life that feels real." She didn't know how to respond. So she stood and walked to the glass doors, looking out over the courtyard. The air outside was still. Inside, her mind was chaos. He was unraveling at the seams, and somehow, the seams were stitched with her. That afternoon, Walter didn't show up to the Senator's Tech Security Summit he'd been scheduled to keynote for 6 months. His staff panicked. Phones rang. Schedules shifted. Juniper found him in the indoor gym, shirtless, hands wrapped in training. Tape. Punching a heavy bag like it had personally offended him. "You're avoiding the world again," she said. He didn't stop. Punch. Punch. Jab. Jab. "You can't keep doing this." He paused, breath ragged. "Do you have any idea what it's like to touch you and then have to pretend none of it matters the next day?" She folded her arms. "We had a contract." He stepped closer, sweat glistening on his skin. "And I tore it the moment I touched you." Juniper stared at him. "You think obsession is romance?" "No," he said, "but it's honest." She swallowed hard. "You're falling apart. I've never been more alive." That night, she stayed in a guest room. Not because he asked her to, because she needed to. She lay on the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering every detail of how his hands felt wrapped around her thighs, how his voice had broken when he whispered her name into her neck. But she also remembered her mother, how she'd lost herself in her father's shadow, how she'd turned silent just to keep the peace. Juniper wouldn't let that happen to herself. The next morning, Walter sat waiting at the dining table. He didn't touch his food. "Where were you last night?" he asked. She didn't sit. "In the guest room. I noticed." "Good." He stood slowly. "If this is your way of punishing me." "It's not punishment," she said. "It's self-preservation." A pause. He stepped closer. "Did I hurt you?" Juniper looked at him for a long time. "No," she said. "But I think you might hurt yourself trying to keep me." His face shifted. Not pain. Not rage. Fear. He didn't follow her that day. Didn't text. Didn't call. And that silence was louder than anything he'd ever said. Juniper sat on a bench outside the Library of Congress, phone in her lap, untouched coffee growing cold beside her. The city moved around her, cars, voices, ambition. She stared straight ahead. He was losing himself in her, and she was starting to fear how much of herself she'd already given. She didn't want to be someone's reason to crash. But part of her, a dangerous, aching part, liked being needed that much. That night, she returned to the estate late. No lights on. She thought he'd left. But then, she saw him. Sitting on the steps, no jacket, sleeves rolled to the elbows, one hand in his hair, the other holding the ring box. The real ring. The one he'd never given her. Not the emerald crown from the ceremony, but a simple gold band. "I had this before the wedding," he said. She stood in the doorway. "I wanted to give it to you after it meant something." Juniper stepped forward slowly. "Does it mean something now?" Walter looked up at her, voice rough. "You do." She sank to her knees beside him. No kiss, no declarations, just her forehead resting against his. Two people on the edge of something terrifying and real. The call came just after noon. Juniper was reviewing press briefings in the library when Walter walked in holding his phone, his jaw tense. "It's your brother." Her spine straightened. "What happened?" "He's at the Capitol steps. Security says he's drunk." Screaming. Juniper stood instantly. "Get the car." When she arrived, cameras were already circling like vultures. Alan Sinclair, former rising star of the Progressive Party, was slumped on the marble steps of the Capitol building. His shirt was untucked, his tie loose, and his speech slurred. "Liars. All of them." He yelled. "You think this place is about justice? It's blood and money." Juniper pushed through the small crowd of aides and interns and knelt beside him. "Alan," she said softly. "It's me." He blinked up at her, eyes glassy. "Junie, you're real. Come on, let's get out of here." He tried to stand, but stumbled. Walter appeared at her side without a word, lifting Alan with practiced strength and walking him to the car. Inside, Alan curled into himself, muttering nonsense. Juniper sat in silence, jaw clenched, eyes burning. Walter didn't speak until they pulled away from the Capitol. "You want to know why he spiraled?" he asked. She didn't respond. He looked at her. "Because he knows I didn't need you to save his career. I could have done it without the marriage." Her head whipped around. "What?" Walter stared straight ahead. "I let him believe it was necessary. I let you believe it." She blinked, stunned. "Why?" "Because if I told you the truth, you would have walked." Juniper stared at him like he was a stranger. "And you call me manipulative." He didn't flinch. "You are. But you're honest about it." Later that evening, Alan lay passed out in a guest room, and Juniper stood in the doorway watching him breathe. Her heart ached. This was the boy who built pillow forts with her, who taught her how to cheat at Monopoly, who stayed up all night helping her prep for college interviews, and now he was broken. Because of debt. Because of shame. Because of Walter. She found Walter in his study, typing something into a secure laptop. He didn't look up. "You used me. I needed leverage. You got it." "I also got you." Juniper stepped inside, shutting the door behind her. "You knew about Alan's embezzlement before he told you?" "Yes." "How long?" "Months." She shook her head. "You planned this?" "No," he said quietly. "I adapted. Don't play semantics with me, Walter. He stood, slowly. I had a file on your brother before I ever met you. She stared. And me? He didn't answer. Her voice dropped. Did you have a file on me too? Walter stepped around the desk. Yes. A pause. Just the sound of her breathing. You watched me, she whispered. I studied you. For what? He exhaled. Because the moment I saw you speak at that ethics hearing last year, I knew you were dangerous. And that made you want to own me? No, he said. It made me want to understand you. Then I met you. And that ruined everything. Juniper's voice cracked. You really think this is love? Walter looked at her, unblinking. I think this is the first time I've been afraid to lose. She didn't sleep that night. She paced the estate corridors, her thoughts chasing each other like ghosts. Everything had been a setup. But somewhere along the way, the lines blurred. She remembered his hands shaking the first time he kissed her forehead. She remembered how he touched her when no one was watching. She remembered his voice in the dark. I've orchestrated every relationship in my life. You were the only one I didn't see coming. In the morning, she went to Alan's room. He was awake, holding a glass of water with shaking fingers. She sat on the edge of the bed. You sold me, she said. He winced. I know. You lied. I thought I was protecting you. No, you were protecting you. Alan looked down. I didn't think he'd care. Juniper's eyes narrowed. Care? About you? At first I thought you were just a tool to him, a pawn. And now? Alan looked up slowly. I think he might burn the whole capital down for you. She stood and walked out. She didn't know which betrayal cut deeper, her brother's desperation or her husband's precision. That evening, Walter found her in the garden, staring up at the stars. He didn't speak. She didn't look at him. You knew from the beginning, she said. Yes, about everything. Yes, and you still came after me. Yes. She turned to face him. Why? His voice was low. Because once I met you, I couldn't walk away. She shook her head. That's not love, Walter. That's obsession. That's control. He stepped closer, inches away. No, he said. That's surrender. The storm rolled in just after midnight. Rain tapped against the windows like impatient fingers. Juniper couldn't sleep. Couldn't even pretend. She needed answers. Not whispered apologies. Not poetic half-truths. She needed proof. Walter's private office was located in a separate wing of the estate, past the east corridor, behind a biometric scanner and under surveillance. Except tonight, for the first time, the scanner was green. Unlocked. She stepped inside. It was colder than she remembered. Sleek black bookshelves, a steel desk, framed certificates, a single chessboard mid-game, and a drawer marked private. She tried the handle. Locked. Her eyes scanned the room. There, beneath the lamp, a ring of keys. She hesitated only a second before sliding them into the drawer. Click. It opened. Inside, files, not digital, physical. Hard copies, hand-labeled. She thumbed through them. Financial records, campaign strategies, donor lists. Then she saw it. A folder with her name on it. Juniper Sinclair. She pulled it out slowly, as if it might burn her fingers. Inside, surveillance photos, captured at a hearing, at a fundraiser, outside a university lecture, 1 year before they met. She turned the pages, notes in sharp pen, personality analysis, behavioral breakdowns, public speaking transcripts, family history, medical records, school transcripts, blood type. She stopped breathing. He hadn't just studied her. He'd watched her, tracked her. Before he ever shook her hand, she stood in the center of the room, folder dangling at her side. When she turned, he was there, leaning in the doorway, watching her. You left it unlocked, she said. I know. You wanted me to find it? Walter stepped forward slowly. You were going to look eventually, and you were okay with that? I didn't say that. Juniper held up the folder. This is insane. I had to know what I was dealing with. I'm not a case study. No. You were a wildfire. I needed to know how close I could stand without getting consumed. She stepped toward him, eyes blazing. You knew everything. Before I ever said yes. Yes. And you used all of it. Walter didn't deny it. Juniper's voice cracked. You took my choices away. He looked at her then, not the strategist, not the predator. Just a man, tired and cornered. I gave them back the moment I saw you walk down that aisle. Liar. He flinched. Juniper shoved the folder into his chest. Was any of it real? He caught it, held it like it weighed more than it should. All of it. She stared at him. Then she stepped back. Don't follow me. She left the study without another word. Rain soaked through her shirt before she reached the car. She didn't care. She drove without a destination, heart pounding, fingers white-knuckling the wheel. He'd studied her like a project, wanted her like a possession, and somewhere along the way, she had started wanting him back. By sunrise, she was parked outside an old coffee shop in Logan Circle. The lights weren't even on yet. She watched the sky shift from gray to gold, her head resting on the steering wheel. No calls came in. Not from Alan. Not from Walter. Silence. When she finally returned to the estate that afternoon, the staff said nothing. Walter wasn't in his office. Not in the gym. Not in the bedroom. But she found him in the kitchen, wearing the same shirt from last night, sitting at the island with the folder in front of him, untouched. He looked up as she walked in. I should have told you, he said. Juniper didn't sit. She didn't speak. I didn't know how. She crossed her arms. You built this entire thing on lies. I built it on necessity. That's not better. Walter leaned forward. You think I don't regret it? She laughed bitterly. You're not the type who regrets. You recalculate. Not with you. Don't. He stood. You think I planned this? That I sat down one day and said, let me manipulate the smartest, sharpest woman I've ever seen into marrying me so I can feel something for once? She blinked. Because I didn't, Juniper. She stared. And for the first time in all their months together, she saw it. The cracks. Not just in his voice. In him. He wasn't controlling this anymore. He was barely holding on. She stepped forward. You should have let me see this sooner. I was scared. Of me? He nodded. Of losing what I never deserved to have. Juniper paused. You don't get to decide that. They stood there in silence. The folder sat between them like a weapon, or a confession. Finally, she whispered, I need time. Walter nodded once. I'll wait. Juniper folded her last blouse into the suitcase with quiet hands. No slamming drawers, no shredded love letters, no tear-soaked dramatics, just a methodical goodbye. She zipped the suitcase closed and stood still for a beat, palms flat on the fabric like it could anchor her. It didn't. She found Walter in the greenhouse. He'd retreated there the past 2 mornings, pruning roses that didn't need pruning, rearranging plants that didn't need rearranging. She stood in the doorway, watching as he snipped a single perfect stem. He saw her in the reflection of the glass. I wondered how long it would take. Juniper didn't move. I'm leaving. He turned. No sharp inhale, no step forward. Just his eyes, landing on the suitcase at her side. I see. She waited for the speech. The appeal. The strategic confession. None came. I'm not doing this because I hate you, she said. I know. I'm doing it because I'm not sure where I end and you begin anymore. He nodded once. I know that, too. Juniper stepped into the greenhouse, the air thick with moisture and the smell of jasmine. I don't regret what we had, she said softly. Neither do I. But I can't build a future on manipulation, Walter. No matter how beautiful the house is. His jaw tightened. I never planned to fall for you, he said, and I never planned to fall into you. A pause. She exhaled. I just need distance. Space. Time to think. He looked down at the pruning shears still in his hand. I won't chase you, he said. I didn't think you would. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the emerald engagement ring. I never liked it, she said. I know. She set it on the potting table, beside the shears, then turned to leave. Walter watched her walk away with a suitcase and no tears. He didn't follow, didn't beg. He stood there long after she was gone, the ring catching the late morning sun, flashing green against his white-knuckled grip on the shears. 3 hours later, Juniper stood in the center of a furnished rental apartment near the lake, staring out at still water. She dropped her bag by the door and collapsed into the couch. No staff, no security detail, no husband, just quiet. She didn't cry. She couldn't. There was something sacred about the silence, like she was hearing her own voice again for the first time in months. The days passed slowly. She kept the curtains open, read actual books, burned toast on purpose, sat barefoot on the porch steps with a cup of tea and no makeup. It felt like she was remembering herself, one page, one breath, one truth at a time. She didn't answer Walter's texts. At first, they were simple. Are you safe? Do you need anything? Then, just timestamps. Blank messages, sent but unsaid. She left them unread. 1 week turned into 2. Then a third, and then a letter. No envelope, no return address. Just a folded page slipped under her door one rainy morning. It was his handwriting. I bought a house by the lake. No cameras, no staff, no security, just stillness. If you want truth, not performance, come find me. She read it twice. Then again, then tucked it inside the spine of the book she'd been reading. And waited. That night, the wind howled through the trees outside. She couldn't sleep. Her body missed his weight. Her skin missed his heat. But more than that, her heart missed being known. Not studied, not recorded, known. By sunrise, she packed a small bag. Not a suitcase, just a sweater, a book, her keys, and drove. The house sat tucked beneath tall pine trees, hidden from the road, half covered in ivy. She parked by the edge of the gravel path. No gate, no cameras, no sign of Walter. She walked up to the porch, knocked once, no answer. She turned the knob. It opened. Inside was warm, dim, the scent of wood smoke and citrus. And there he was, in the living room, chopping wood, shirtless, unshaven, barefoot. He didn't speak, didn't smile, just looked up and froze. Juniper stepped inside slowly. You gave up everything, she said. Walter straightened. For you, she stared at him. No press? No donors? No. She paused. For you? He shook his head. For me. They stood in silence. Then he walked to the fireplace and tossed the last log onto the flame. It cracked, spit, caught fire. Later they sat side by side on a small couch, legs barely touching, hands empty. Two people who'd broken everything, and still chose to sit beside the wreckage. Walter poured wine. Juniper didn't drink it. He didn't push. They watched the flames in silence. Then he spoke. I never said I loved you. She looked at him. No, she said. You didn't. He set the glass down. Because love means surrender, and I never surrendered anything. She didn't respond. Until his voice broke. But I'm ready now. Walter Thorne vanished from the headlines without a single statement. No press release. No official withdrawal. Just silence. The Capitol buzzed in his absence. Power brokers whispered. News anchors speculated. Has Thorne stepped down from political ambitions? Thorne skips summit in Brussels. Deputy sends cryptic no comment. Once the coldest strategist in D.C., now missing in action. He had ghosted the very machine he built. Juniper read the articles from her porch swing. Not to check on him, she told herself, but because she needed to know what version of the truth the world had chosen. Some said he was sick. Others said it was a power play. Only one columnist, buried in the local section, dared to ask, what if the empire never mattered to him as much as one woman did? She closed the browser, tossed her phone across the couch, and stared out at the lake. 2 weeks passed. No new sightings, no campaign statements, no gala appearances. The name Walter Thorne stopped trending, but he didn't leave her mind for a moment. Juniper spent her days writing, not articles, not policy briefs. Letters. Some she burned. Some she sealed in envelopes she never intended to send. One she kept on her nightstand. Folded, blank, because some truths didn't need ink. They needed time. Alan called once. You hear from him? He asked. She said nothing. He left me a voicemail, Alan said. Just said, thank you for protecting her. And I'm sorry for using you to get to her. Juniper's chest tightened. Alan paused. I think he meant it. She nodded, then ended the call. At the lake house, the firewood was always stocked. The porch never swept. The kitchen light left on all night. as if Walter hoped she'd return when she thought no one was watching. She didn't. Not yet. But she wrote another letter. This one, she signed, "Walter, you scare me. Not because you hurt me, but because you saw me, entirely. And I forgot what that felt like. J." She folded it. Didn't seal it. Placed it beside the blank one on her nightstand. One evening she turned on the news. A panel debated foreign policy. The host said, had Walter Thorne still been in Washington, he would have, but she muted the TV before the sentence finished. He wasn't in Washington anymore. He was waiting. The next day, she didn't plan it. She just drove. She didn't pack a bag, didn't text, just followed the route to that quiet little house with the ivy-covered porch. He was there, chopping wood again, shirt damp with sweat, expression unreadable. He looked up as the gravel crunched beneath her tires. No shock, no smile, just stillness, as if he'd been expecting her all along. She got out of the car and stood across from him. No suitcase, no conditions, just her. "I read the articles," she said. "I know. They think you've disappeared." "I have." She stepped closer. "Why?" Walter dropped the axe. "Because I was tired of building empires on lies." She nodded slowly. "And now? I want to build something real, even if it's small, even if it's just us." Juniper studied his face. No mask, no weaponized charm, just him, quiet, bare, ready. "I'm not here to forgive everything," she said. "I'm not asking you to. I still need space sometimes. I'll give it. I don't want to be worshipped. Then I'll stand beside you." A pause. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the letter, the signed one, held it out. He took it, unfolded it, read it, then looked at her. "You stayed away," he said softly, "so you wouldn't get lost in me." "I came back," she replied, "so I wouldn't lose myself." He stepped forward, close enough to touch, but didn't. She had to decide, and she did. Juniper took his hand, not because she was weak, but because strength sometimes meant choosing softness. They walked back inside without another word, just hands clasped. Two equals. No headlines, no contracts, only choice. The next morning, the lake was quiet, still. Sunlight stretched across the water like it had nowhere else to be. Juniper sat on the porch swing, a coffee mug in one hand, the blanket from Walter's couch wrapped around her shoulders. No makeup, no press briefings, just skin and air. Walter stepped outside barefoot, holding a brown folder. He didn't speak, just sat beside her, setting the folder between them. She glanced at it, then at him. "What's that?" "No tricks," he said. "Just clarity." Juniper didn't touch it. Instead, she asked, "Are you done hiding?" Walter's eyes met hers. "I was never hiding." "Then what were you doing?" "Waiting for the noise to die." "And now?" "Now, I want something honest." She finally opened the folder. Inside, a single piece of paper. No legal stamp, no lawyer's watermark, just a handwritten list. No staff, no surveillance, no scheduled appearances, no manipulation, no expectations. Just us, as we are. And at the bottom, 2 lines in bold, "This is not a contract. This is an invitation." Juniper stared at it, then laughed, just once, soft and sharp. "You're really committing to the bare minimum." Walter smiled faintly. For someone who once negotiated trade embargo loopholes in Brussels, this was harder. She kept reading. Her finger paused over the final bullet. "No past used as currency." She looked at him. "That one's new." "I used your past against you," he said. "Your public image, your integrity, your family." She nodded. "You used your own too," she said. He tilted his head. "I didn't have much left." Juniper closed the folder. "I don't want to live in exile," she said. "This isn't exile. Feels like it." Walter leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "It's not running, Juniper. It's choosing stillness." She narrowed her eyes. "That sounds like something people say when they've given up." "It's what I'm saying, because I've finally stopped pretending." A breeze moved through the trees. Juniper sipped her coffee, heart still and loud at the same time. "You really think this will work?" she asked. Walter didn't answer right away. Then, only if we wanted to. She looked down at the paper again. It wasn't legal. It wasn't binding. It was honest, and that made it more dangerous than any document she'd ever signed. That afternoon they went grocery shopping. Together. No driver. No bodyguards. Just them, pushing a cart through a small-town co-op. Walter insisted on cooking dinner. Juniper stood in the corner of the kitchen, watching the man who used to intimidate. Senator's now squinting at the instructions on a box of couscous. "You're a mess," she said. He poured olive oil like it was wine. "I'm your mess now." They ate on the floor. No table, no candles, just mismatched plates and shared laughter. He asked about her dreams, not her goals. She asked about his regrets, not his wins. They talked until the wine bottle was empty and the sky turned black. Later, she lay in bed with her head on his chest. The air smelled like garlic and warmth. His hand rested on her back, steady. "This doesn't erase what happened," she whispered. "I wouldn't want it to," he said. "Why?" "Because it's what broke us open." She listened to the rhythm of his breathing. No mask, no coldness, no control. Just Walter, unmade, undone, and willing. She rolled over, propped up on one elbow. "Why didn't you fight me when I left?" He looked at the ceiling. "Because love doesn't force." She watched him. "That wasn't the version of you I knew. That version was afraid of losing power. And this one?" He looked at her. "Afraid of losing you." Juniper nodded once, then reached for the folder again. Crossed out one line. He leaned over to see. She had struck through, no expectations. He looked at her, puzzled. She said, "I expect you to stay." He smiled. "Always." The cabin didn't look like much from the outside. Wooden siding, one porch light, a firewood pile stacked high under the overhang. But when Juniper stepped inside, it was warm, quiet, clean in a way that wasn't staged, just lived in. She slipped off her coat, hung it by the door, and looked around. No artwork, no politics, no sign of Walter's other life, just this one. A life stripped of audience. Walter stood by the fireplace, sleeves rolled, barefoot. The flames lit his face unevenly, one side gold, the other shadow. Juniper didn't speak. She walked over slowly, stopping a few inches from him. Neither reached, not yet. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was full. "I thought about this," he said, voice low. "About what?" "This moment." Juniper tilted her head. "What were you expecting?" "I wasn't." A pause. "I just hoped." She reached for his hand. He didn't grab, he allowed. Fingers threaded, palms aligned, a connection, no pressure, no force. She stepped closer, chest against his, chin lifting just enough to meet his mouth. The kiss was slow, not timid, just present. His hand slid to the back of her neck, not possessive, protective. She sighed into him, and he pulled her closer, like he'd finally remembered how to breathe. He didn't rush, didn't take. He waited for her to unbutton his shirt, waited for her to slip out of hers, waited for her to nod once before he lifted her off the floor. No words, only breath. The bedroom was small. One window, no curtains, just moonlight pouring across the sheets. He laid her down carefully, like he was placing her at the center of something sacred. She watched him undress, not hungrily, but attentively, like memorizing him meant anchoring herself. When he joined her in bed, she didn't reach first. He did. Fingertips traced the edge of her ribs, the line of her hip, the soft curve beneath her breast. Not claiming, discovering. She touched his jaw, then ran her thumb over his mouth. "You're not the same," she whispered. "I never was," he said. "You just brought out the part I buried." He kissed her again, lower, slower, like a vow. When he entered her, they both gasped, soft, almost startled. It wasn't about domination. It wasn't about release. It was return. Their rhythm was gentle, uneven, real. Bodies shifting, breath catching, hands everywhere and nowhere at once. Foreheads pressed, mouths parting. He whispered her name like a prayer, and she answered with his. No cries, no performance, only truth. When she climaxed, it wasn't a peak, it was a surrender. Her fingers gripped his shoulders, her mouth against his ear, her body arching not to escape, but to open. And when he followed, it wasn't violent. It was deep. Final. They didn't move. Didn't speak. His arm draped across her waist. Her leg over his. Their hearts slowing in tandem. The fire popped once in the next room. Walter kissed the top of her head. "I would have waited forever," he said. She smiled against his skin. "I'm glad I didn't make you." Later she woke up wrapped in a tangle of limbs and linen. She looked at him, eyes closed, breathing even, jaw finally relaxed. The man who once ruled Washington now slept like someone who had nothing left to prove. She kissed his collarbone and whispered into his chest, This is what real feels like." He pulled her closer, still half asleep. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. The sun rose lazily over the lake, scattering gold across the wooden floors. Juniper stood at the cabin sink, washing 2 mugs. Walter sat at the table behind her, reading a paperback, his glasses sliding slightly down his nose. There were no aides, no agendas, no hidden microphones. Only quiet. And the smell of black coffee. Juniper dried her hands, then turned. "Let's make rules." Walter looked up, amused. "Rules? If this is real, if we're going to start over, then yes, ground rules." He set the book down. "All right. You start." She stepped toward him, serious. "No pretending." He nodded. "Agreed. No sugarcoating." "Yes." "No saying what you think I want to hear." Walter smirked. "That might be harder." Juniper narrowed her eyes. "And no using silence as punishment." He paused, then nodded. "Deal." She sat across from him. He leaned in slightly. "My turn?" "Go. No disappearing into work when things get emotional." Juniper arched a brow. "And what if I am the work now?" He smiled faintly. "Then, I'll show up on time." She considered that. "Fair." Walter poured her more coffee without asking. She didn't thank him. Didn't need to. It was becoming normal. "You were never like this," she said after a while. "Like what?" "Soft." He met her gaze. "I was. You just didn't see it. Because you didn't let me." He nodded. "That's true. Soft." He met her gaze. "I was. You just didn't see it. Because you didn't let me." He nodded. "That's true." Juniper leaned back, mug cradled between her palms. "You terrified me. I terrified myself." Silence. Honest. Sharp. "I used to think you didn't feel anything," she said. "I did," he answered. "But I didn't know what to do with it." She studied him. "And now?" "I feel everything," he said, "and I'm learning how to stay." Later, they took a walk by the lake. Shoes off, jeans rolled, water lapping at their ankles. Juniper picked up a smooth rock, turned it over in her hand. "Did you ever really think we'd get here?" Walter watched her. "No." "Then why chase me?" "Because I didn't want anyone else to." "That's not the same as love." "I know." A pause. She tossed the rock into the water. "Do you love me now?" she asked quietly. "Yes." "How do you know?" Walter didn't hesitate. "Because I'm not building anything else." That night, they cooked together. She chopped vegetables. He burned the chicken. They laughed. He tried again. Succeeded. Barely. After dinner, they sat on the porch. No wine. No distractions. Just her head on his shoulder. His thumb tracing her knuckles. Juniper whispered, "What happens when the world finds you again?" Walter replied, "Then they'll see a man who chose a woman over a throne. And what if I don't want the world to see me at all? Then we stay hidden. For how long? As long as it feels right." She looked up at him. "You're not afraid anymore, are you?" "Only of losing this." She nodded. "Then let's protect it." Later in bed, she kissed his chest once before curling against him. "I still have questions," she whispered. "I'm ready for all of them. Even the hard ones? Especially those." She exhaled. "I might not ask tonight." "That's fine." He wrapped an arm around her. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time in months, she believed him. Walter stood in the kitchen doorway, sleeves pushed up, watching Juniper as she danced barefoot to a vinyl playing in the corner. It wasn't polished dancing. It wasn't meant for anyone but her. Hair messy, shirt loose, spinning in tiny circles like the weight of the world had finally slid off her shoulders. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer commentary. He just watched the woman who had once stormed out of his estate now twirling in his cabin, smiling without needing to be asked. Free. She caught him staring and grinned. You gonna just stand there like a statue? I'm taking mental pictures, he said. She tilted her head. For blackmail? He joined her mid-spin. Badly. Off rhythm. All shoulders. She laughed, arms looping around his neck. You're terrible at this. I never learned how to be light, he murmured. She kissed him once, gently. You don't have to be perfect. Just willing. They moved together, clumsy and uncoordinated, until the song ended. Walter pressed his forehead to hers. I used to lead every dance, he said. And? I never realized how exhausting it was, until you let me follow. That afternoon, Juniper pulled out a notepad and sat at the kitchen table. What's that? Walter asked. A list. For what? Things you've never told me. He poured water into a glass. That could take a while. Good, she said. We have time. He sat across from her. Start with something small, she said. He thought for a second. I once cried during a speech. Her brow arched. No one noticed. But I had a moment, a real one. It caught me off guard. What was it about? He swallowed. Veteran support bill. The language was standard. The numbers weren't. She nodded slowly. He added, it was the first time I realized numbers could hurt. She wrote that down, then looked up. My turn? He smiled. Fair is fair. I hated being photographed at our wedding. I know. But the moment I looked at you, the only thing that kept me from running was how still you looked. Like if I bolted, you'd still be there. Walter's breath caught. I would've. I know, she said softly. Hours passed. They traded truths, old fears, missed chances, names of childhood pets, favorite teachers, books that shaped them, regrets they never voiced out loud. And by the time the sun dipped low, they weren't holding hands, they were holding history. After dinner, Juniper sat on the porch steps. Walter joined her. She turned to him. I want to ask you something personal. You've earned that. Why did you let me go? He didn't speak right away. Then, because I saw what I was doing to you. And what was that? Chasing you into corners, loving you like a war strategy. She looked at him. And now, I love you like a choice. She leaned her head on his shoulder. He rested his chin on hers. You're bending, she whispered. For the right reasons, he said. Back inside, he folded their laundry. She cleaned the kitchen. No performance, no declarations, just ordinary. And somehow, that felt revolutionary. That night, as they slid into bed, Juniper asked quietly, Do you miss the power? Walter shook his head. Power was always about control. This is trust. She pulled the blanket up to her chin. I like this version of you. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. So do I. And then they slept. No words, no plans, just peace. The fire crackled in the corner, casting waves of amber across the cabin walls. Juniper sat cross-legged on the floor, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her eyes tracked the dance of the flames, unfocused but calm. Walter sat behind her on the couch, watching her, not possessively, not hungrily, just present. I used to think intimacy meant taking, Juniper said quietly. Walter didn't speak. She turned slightly toward him. With you, I don't feel taken. I feel held. He stood, stepped down beside her, and sat cross-legged across from her. Kiss me, she said. Not a plea, not a challenge. He leaned in and pressed his mouth to hers, slow, like an answer to a question she hadn't finished asking. His hand cradled her jaw, thumb brushing her cheek. Juniper let the blanket fall from her shoulders. Her fingers slid beneath the hem of his shirt, palms flat against his skin. Warm. Real. Here. Walter broke the kiss long enough to meet her eyes. I don't want to rush, he whispered. Then don't, she replied. But don't hold back either. He exhaled like he'd been waiting for permission he didn't realize he needed. He undressed her gently, each piece folded, not discarded. She did the same for him. No frenzy, no urgency, Just skin meeting skin, like it belonged there. They moved to the rug before the fire, a pillow beneath her head, his hands tracing the curve of her waist, the line of her thigh. She arched into him with a breath, not a cry. This wasn't conquest. This was communion. He slid into her slowly, both of them exhaling in sync. No pounding rhythm. Just presence. Just breath. Just being. Juniper wrapped her legs around his waist, her arms around his neck, pulling him closer even when there was no space left between them. His lips brushed her collarbone, her temple, the hollow of her throat. Every kiss a sentence, every thrust a syllable. Together, they wrote an entirely new language. "Look at me," she whispered. He did. Eyes locked, foreheads pressed, bodies moving in soft unison. No chase, no dominance, no fear, only devotion. Her climax came like a sunrise, gradual, warming, filling her to the edges. She didn't scream. She exhaled his name like a truth. Walter followed moments later, not with a roar, but with a quiet shudder, his mouth on her shoulder, her hands in his hair, and something unspoken blooming between them. They lay tangled on the rug, firelight stroking their skin. Juniper turned her head, watching his chest rise and fall. "You didn't ask me to come back," she said. "No. Why not?" "Because real love doesn't beg. It invites." She nodded. "I almost didn't." "I know, but I'm glad I did." "I'll never forget that you did." He kissed the back of her hand. She smiled. "You're warmer now," she said. "You made me warmer." They didn't get off the floor. They pulled a blanket down and wrapped it around themselves. She fell asleep against his chest. He stayed awake a while longer, listening to the fire crackle, listening to her breathe, knowing finally he didn't need anything else. The phone rang just after breakfast. Juniper stared at it, untouched, steam rising from her untouched coffee. Walter didn't ask who it was. He waited. She let it go to voicemail, then picked it up again. 3 new notifications. 1 text from Alan. 1 email from a Capitol Policy Chair. 1 missed call from a number labeled DC Office, Ethics Board. She set the phone face down. "You should take the call," Walter said. Juniper shook her head. "Not today." He reached for her hand across the table. "You've been gone 6 weeks." "Exactly. You were born to lead, Juniper." She looked up. "And if I was born to rest?" Walter smiled faintly. "Then this table becomes our kingdom." The silence stretched. She finally spoke. "I miss using my voice." "Then use it." She hesitated. "What if I can't do both? Be with you and be me?" "Yes." He tightened his grip on her hand. "Then we learn how to be us in both places." That afternoon, she opened the email. Subject, committee seat reinstatement proposal. They wanted her back. Not in some junior role. In the lead. A chair seat on the Senate's Bipartisan Ethics Reform Board. A direct result of the scandals Walter had helped clean up before he disappeared. Poetic. Painful. Tempting. She read the full email twice. Then again. She closed the laptop, walked outside, stood at the lake's edge, and screamed. Not in anger, not in pain, in decision. Walter found her seated on the steps when the sun dipped below the trees. Her expression was clear, still, grounded. "I want to go back," she said. He sat beside her. "I know. I'm scared." "Of what?" "Losing us." Walter took her hand. "Then we define what us looks like in the real world." She nodded slowly. "I don't want to live in the shadows." "Then don't." "I don't want to hide you. I'm not afraid of being seen." She looked at him. "I never expected you to say that." He smiled. "That's because you remember the man who needed control." "And you?" The next day she got dressed in slacks, a navy blouse and low heels. Simple, clean, professional. Walter watched her from the doorway. "You look like the woman who once terrified 5 press secretaries in 30 minutes. She laughed. "I am her. But you're also more." She turned. "Do you want me to stay?" Walter stepped forward. "I want you to rise." She reached for him, held his face in her palms. "I'll be back," she said. "I'll be here." She drove herself. No security, no drivers, no press, just Juniper, returning on her own terms. When she entered the Capitol building, the marble floors echoed her every step. A few heads turned, but no one approached. Not yet. She walked into the conference room. Allen was there. So were 2 senators, and a handful of lobbyists. They stood, not because she asked, because they knew. Juniper Sinclair had returned. After the meeting, Allen followed her out. "You okay?" She nodded. "You really went off the grid. I had to." He watched her. "You look stronger." She turned. "I am." Allen hesitated. "And Walter?" She met his eyes. "He's not the same either." A pause. "Good," Allen said. "Because you deserved better." She stepped closer. "He's becoming that man. Then maybe he deserves you now." Juniper smiled faintly. "Maybe." Back at the cabin, Walter was barefoot, kneeling by the fire, building warmth from ash. She stepped inside, dropped her bag, and wrapped her arms around his waist from behind. "I'm not done," she said. He rested his hand over hers. "Good." She pressed her cheek to his back. "But I'm not leaving either." He turned, met her eyes. "Then we lead together." 3 days after her Capitol return, Juniper received a call. It wasn't from Allen, not from the Ethics Committee. It was a direct line from a national news network. Primetime debate moderator, national stage. One night, millions watching. "We want you to represent the independent voice," the producer said. "You're sharp, respected, untouched by scandal. Viewers trust you." She didn't answer immediately. That night, she paced the cabin, back and forth, from fireplace to window, window to kitchen. Walter sat quietly on the porch, hands folded, waiting. He didn't interrupt her thoughts, didn't ask questions, didn't offer advice, just waited. Eventually she joined him. The moon was half full. The air smelled of pine and early frost. She stood by the railing, arms crossed. "They want me on national television," she said. Walter looked up. "For what?" "Moderating a national pre-to-election debate, not party-sponsored, public trust broadcast. I'd be the anchor voice." He nodded slowly. "It fits." She turned. "Does it?" "Only if it fits you." She sat beside him. "It's exposure I never asked for," she said. "It's leadership you've earned." Juniper tapped her fingers on her knee. "I'd be scrutinized. Every word, every blink, everything we've built would be under a microscope again." Walter didn't flinch. "You've handled worse." She looked at him. "This time, I have something to lose." He exhaled. "Then don't take it for power. Take it for purpose." She didn't sleep much that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw 2 lives. One, in front of a camera. Sharp suits, national applause, her voice defining the conversation. The other, in this cabin. Firelight, bare feet, his breath at her neck. She wanted both. The next morning, she sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. Walter handed her coffee without a word. She sipped it slowly, then said, "I need you to be honest. Always. If I say yes to this, will you still want me?" Walter knelt in front of her, took the mug from her hands and placed it on the floor. "I don't want the quiet without you," he said. "If your truth is louder than this cabin, I'll be the one sitting in the front row." Her eyes welled. She blinked once, then nodded. She made the call before noon. "I accept, but on my terms. No scripted questions. No image consultants. No wardrobe guidelines. Just her voice. Unfiltered." That evening, she and Walter sat on the floor again, eating leftovers from mismatched bowls. She leaned back against his chest. "I'll be away for 4 days. I'll pack your bags. I'll be in makeup for 3 hours. I'll still recognize you. They'll come for you, you know. Dig things up. I'm not hiding anymore." Juniper tilted her head to look at him. "Why not?" "Because I'm proud of who I became loving you." The fire crackled again. She whispered, "I'm scared." He kissed her temple. "So am I. But we're doing it anyway?" He nodded. "That's what courage looks like." That night, she wrote out her opening lines. Longhand, in the notebook Walter had given her after their first night at the lake house. She practiced them once, twice, then closed the book. No one needed to tell her who she was anymore. She had decided that for herself, and this time she would speak for everyone who never had the chance. Juniper stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the neckline of her deep navy dress. No sparkle, no lace, just power stitched into simplicity. Her phone buzzed. "Walter, you've got this. I'll be watching from exactly 3 feet in front of the screen." She smiled, typed back, "I don't need a teleprompter. I've got fire." His reply came instantly. Exactly why I fell. The debate went viral. Clips of Juniper correcting 2 senators went live before the final question was even asked. Her closing line? "Public service is not a favor, it's a vow. If you can't make that vow, step aside." The room had gone quiet, then erupted. By midnight, the internet crowned her the new face of political accountability. By dawn, every major outlet had her name trending. She didn't check the hashtags. She only cared about one message. From Walter, come home. There's something I need to ask you. She arrived at the lake house just after sunset. No crowd, no camera crews. Just Walter, standing barefoot on the porch, hair slightly windblown, holding a small wooden box in one hand. She stepped out of the car slowly. "You didn't wait inside. I wanted to see you the second you pulled in." She climbed the steps. "So dramatic." He smiled. "Only for you." They stood there for a moment, the air thick with something unspoken. Finally, he held out the box. Juniper stared at it. "That looks dangerously symbolic." "It's not a demand," Walter said. "It's a declaration." She took the box, opened it. Inside, a gold band. Plain. No stones, no ceremony. Etched on the inner curve, no more control. Just choice. Juniper didn't speak for a long moment. Then, "Are you asking me to marry you again?" "I'm asking if you'd still choose me, knowing everything." "And what would this mean? A ceremony? A contract?" Walter shook his head. "It means whatever you want it to mean. If you wear it, you define it. If you don't, I'm still yours." She looked down at the ring again, then at him. "You always know the right words now." He gave a soft laugh. "I had a good teacher." Juniper took the ring from the box, slid it onto her middle finger, not the traditional one. Walter raised an eyebrow. "I'm not done writing my own story," she said. He nodded. "Then I'll be the chapter that never pressures the ending." They went inside. No champagne, no announcements, just quiet and the sound of a woman reclaiming her identity on her own terms with a man who had learned to meet her where she stood. Later, by the fire, Juniper leaned against his chest. Walter traced the edge of the ring on her finger. "You knew I wouldn't wear it traditionally," she murmured. "I hoped you wouldn't." "Why?" "Because tradition never held your kind of power." She turned her head to look up at him. "I want us to build something," she said, "but not from the past, from the ground up." His hand settled on her waist. "Then I'm ready to follow your blueprint." Outside, the lake was still. The same stillness that once symbolized retreat now whispered something new. Foundation, not isolation. Freedom, not escape. She lifted her hand, studied the ring in the firelight. "It's not a symbol of submission," she said. "No," Walter agreed. "It's a mark of presence." Her lips curved. "You're getting good at this." He kissed her shoulder. "I've had time to learn." The morning after the ring, Juniper sat barefoot on the cabin deck, a fleece blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The lake was cloaked in morning mist, glassy and unmoving. Coffee steamed from a chipped mug in her hands. Walter was still asleep inside. She hadn't intended to cry, but something in the stillness stirred a memory loose, one she'd buried, carefully, deliberately. She could see it now, not as a blur, but in perfect detail. She was 10, still small enough to sit on the counter while her mother stirred soup. The kitchen smelled of thyme and salt and love. Alan was playing outside, sword fighting the autumn wind. Juniper had asked, "Mom, why don't you ever rest?" Her mother had laughed softly, the kind that sounded like exhaustion hiding behind grace. Then she'd said, "Because rest is expensive, and women who want respect are always paying for it." Juniper hadn't understood it then, but now it landed like a stone in her chest. She sipped her coffee, closed her eyes, and whispered into the air, "You were right." She walked down to the dock, barefoot on wet wood, and sat with her knees pulled to her chest. She could still hear her mother's voice, hoarse but steady. That same week, her mother had braided Juniper's hair and said, "Don't be afraid to want more." but don't let more replace who you are. Juniper had forgotten that part. Until now. Until this exact morning, when her life was full of everything she once feared she could never hold: respect, love, independence, and still, herself. Walter came down a few minutes later, shirtless, in gray sweatpants, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He didn't speak at first, just sat beside her, silent and warm. After a while he asked, "You okay?" I remembered her. He nodded. "Your mother?" "She taught me how to want without apology. That's rare. She told me not to confuse exhaustion with purpose." Walter was quiet, then said, "Maybe that's why you finally chose rest, not because you quit, but because you understood it doesn't cost your soul." Juniper let her head fall to his shoulder. They sat like that, watching mist rise from the water. She whispered, "I think it's time." "For what?" "To write again. But not speeches, not laws." He turned slightly. "What then?" "A book. Maybe essays, maybe letters, to women like her, like me, like those still trying to hold everything without falling apart." Walter's expression softened. "I'll clear the office. Make it your writing room." She smiled. "Thank you." They rose from the dock. Back inside, she opened her journal and wrote 5 words on the first page. Rest is not retreat, it's revolution. The lake house had changed. Or maybe Juniper had. The walls now held paintings she'd picked during her last solo trip to Italy. The bookshelf no longer leaned from overstuffed files. It now held poetry, essays, old journals. And in the far corner, a writing desk. Simple, unadorned, sacred. It was early evening when Walter called her to the dock. He wore a navy blue sweater, dark jeans, barefoot like always. Juniper followed in silence, heart unsure of what this moment was supposed to be. But she trusted his silence now. He'd earned that. The air was cold enough to kiss the skin, but still. Stillness had always meant something different here. Tonight, it felt like breath before a beginning. Walter turned toward her, not with urgency, with peace. "I've thought about this for a long time," he said quietly. "Every night since that first morning you walked out of my house wearing that oversized coat and your pride." Juniper tilted her head, lips curled slightly. "You mean my armor?" "I mean your sovereignty." She folded her arms. "And what do you want to do with that now?" He pulled something from his pocket. Not a box. Just a single band, thinner than before, hand-etched. He held it out with both palms, offering not possession, but promise. "This is not a proposal for power, Juniper." She blinked. He continued, "This isn't about last names. It isn't about rings. It isn't about legacy. I don't want to marry you for the boardrooms or the headlines." Juniper said nothing. Walter took a step closer. "I want to marry you because when I wake up beside you, I believe in goodness again." Silence. Then Juniper's voice, measured and soft. "What would it look like?" "No venue. No vows written by tradition, no titles, just us, a morning ceremony, barefoot. You can wear jeans if you want, or don't wear anything at all." She laughed, a low, surprised sound. "That's your pitch?" He smiled. "My vow is simple. I'll love you without needing you to shrink. I'll stay without ever needing to own." Juniper reached for the ring, turned it over. On the inside, in her own handwriting, engraved perfectly, were the words she once left in a note on his desk. "To be chosen, not kept." Her eyes widened. "You kept that paper?" "I memorized every loop of your script." She took a breath, not because she was unsure, but because she wanted to remember what it felt like to walk into love without fear. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't choosing safety. She was choosing presence. "I accept," she said softly. Walter exhaled, like he'd been holding that breath for years. She added, "But only if I get to marry you barefoot too." His grin was slow, reverent. "It's a deal." They kissed under the open sky. No fireworks, no fanfare, just the gentle clink of a ring sliding onto her finger, her choice, her timing, her terms. The next morning, they stood in front of the fireplace with 2 close friends and a legal officiant who asked, "Do you come of your own free will?" Juniper looked up at Walter. "Always." Walter replied, "No contracts, just forever." And the officiant said, "Then let this union be not the beginning, but the honoring of what you've already built." They didn't announce it. There were no invitations, no designer dresses flown in from Milan, no photographers crouched behind shrubs, no gossip leaks. Only one message left on Juniper's locked screen. This time, you choose. The clearing was deep in the woods behind the lake house, a place only deer and silence knew. Juniper stood barefoot in soft grass, the hem of her linen slip brushing the earth. Walter waited by a low stone altar, one they'd stacked together days before with their hands, not contractors. A quiet circle of pine trees bore witness, and above them, the sky didn't roar, it listened. Juniper had carried her mother's scarf tied around her wrist. Walter wore no tie, no watch, just a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. They faced each other as if no time had passed between the day they were first bound by force and the day they now bound by freedom. I wrote something, Walter said, unfolding a page from his pocket. He paused, then crumpled it gently and let it fall. No, he said, I want to say it the real way. Juniper's eyebrows lifted, amused. He cleared his throat. I used to think love meant control, or at least security. I thought I could measure love by what I could protect. He stepped closer. But I've learned, loving you means letting go. Not losing you, but trusting you, not watching you, but witnessing you. Juniper's eyes glistened. Walter's voice softened. I vow to stay when it's not easy, to speak when silence hurts, to listen when my pride screams, and above all, to choose you, not because I'm allowed to, but because I want to. Every day. Juniper stepped forward. She didn't carry paper, just her voice and her heart, raw and certain. I was never the woman who dreamt of weddings. Walter nodded. He already knew. But this, she looked around the clearing, this is not a wedding. He blinked. She continued, this is a return to who I was before duty, before I was anyone's tool, anyone's pawn, before Alan made choices for me, before you looked at me with coldness. Walter lowered his eyes. And still, she said, you are here. Not for redemption, but for truth. He looked back up. Juniper placed her palm against his chest. My vow is this, I will never abandon myself again, not even for love, but I will share myself completely with the one who sees me whole. You see me? Walter whispered. I do. She smiled. Then that is enough. There were no rings this time. Just touch, and breath, and hands intertwined. They kissed under a canopy of leaves, their foreheads pressed together afterward, neither speaking, both trembling slightly. Afterward, they sat on a flat boulder near the stream. No rush to return to the world. Juniper leaned into his shoulder. Do you think this will last? Walter answered without hesitation. Yes. She tilted her head. Why? Because we didn't build this on roles or rules. We built this on choice. Juniper nodded. That's all I ever wanted. He reached down, plucked a single wildflower, and tucked it behind her ear. You still take my breath away, he whispered. You still give me space to breathe, she replied. The wind picked up slightly, but neither of them moved. Because for once in their lives, time didn't ask them to. The line appeared slowly. First, a faint blur, then bold, undeniable. Juniper stared at it, still, silent, almost reverent. Not in fear. Not yet. Just disbelief. The box had promised 3 minutes. She hadn't waited even one. She knew. Her body had already whispered it weeks ago. The early tiredness, the aversion to her usual tea, the strange ache in her lower back during meditation. But now, here it was. Undeniable. 2 lines. She didn't cry. Not at first. She sat on the closed toilet seat, her robe still belted, the lake house bathroom window cracked open. Cold air drifted in. Juniper watched the trees sway, unaware that the woman inside was no longer just a woman, but a vessel. Not metaphorically, literally. Her hand went to her belly. Flat still, unchanged to the eye. But everything inside her pulsed differently now. She whispered, twins? The word trembled in the air like a secret begging to be kept. She didn't tell Walter that night. He'd been in the kitchen, making roasted garlic soup. He always cooked when his brain refused stillness. She watched him from the hallway, the way he leaned into the spices like prayer. She could have said it then, could have walked up to him, placed his hand on her stomach, and watched his eyes widen. But she didn't. Not because she didn't trust him. Because she didn't trust her own peace just yet. The last time she'd carried anything this sacred, it had been the burden of someone else's decisions. A forced marriage. A life not her own, a bed shared with cold silence. And though Walter had changed, she needed to know this joy wasn't temporary, that it belonged to her before it belonged to him. So she hid the strip inside an old leather journal, the same one she wrote poetry in back when she was Alan's shadow. She tucked it between the pages marked, "Things I want to say but haven't yet." The next morning, Walter reached for her under the covers, nuzzling her neck. "You okay?" he murmured. She smiled. "Just thinking." "About what?" She kissed his forehead. "Everything." He didn't press, not because he wasn't curious, but because love, real love, didn't interrogate. It invited. That day, Juniper wandered into the woods alone. Wrapped in a thick cardigan, boots unlaced, scarf around her neck, she found the clearing where they had said their private vows, and she whispered again, "Twins," as if nature could hold the news without breaking. She sat on the grass, pulled her knees to her chest, and imagined 2 heartbeats inside her. Not 1, 2. She pictured tiny hands. One with her fingers, one with Walter's, one curious, one shy. And just like that, she began to cry. Not from fear, not even from joy, but from the overwhelming truth that her body, the same body once controlled, once broken, once bartered, was now writing its own future. From within, she returned home before sunset. Dinner was quiet. Walter watched her longer than usual. "You sure you're okay?" he asked again. Juniper nodded, but her hands fidgeted with her glass. She knew she couldn't hide it forever, but for now, just for one more night, she wanted it to be hers. Not his, not the world's, not the press's, hers. And so she kissed him goodnight with something sacred beneath her tongue. A secret, a beginning, a quiet power, growing. The envelope was unmarked. Walter had found it on his pillow, carefully placed, perfectly centered. Inside, a folded photo, slightly warm from her touch. He opened it and froze. 2 tiny beans, side by side, spines curled like commas, and underneath, in her handwriting, "They're ours." He sat on the edge of the bed. His thumb pressed gently against the edge of the sonogram, as if afraid too much force would erase them. Twins, not in theory, not in someday, but now, inside her, growing. He didn't speak, didn't shout, didn't run to find her. He just stared. And for the first time since childhood, he cried. Not the controlled, man-shaped tears he allowed once at his mother's funeral. Not the tight-eyed ones he blinked away during Alan's betrayal. These weren't silent. They weren't hidden. They came in waves, unstoppable, messy, sacred. Juniper found him like that. Curled slightly forward, face in his hands, the sonogram between his fingers. He didn't hear her enter. Didn't feel her until her hand pressed against his back. Warm, steady, anchoring. He turned to her, eyes red, jaw trembling. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. She sat beside him. "You don't have to know yet. I've never seen it done right, not once. I know." He swallowed hard. "They'll expect me to be strong." "No," Juniper said gently. "They'll need you to be real." He pulled her into his arms, burying his face into her neck. His body shook, and still she held him. This man, her husband, who once commanded boardrooms with a glare, now breaking in her arms for the life he helped create. When the storm inside him quieted, Walter spoke again. "I spent years thinking legacy was about buildings, empires, control." Juniper brushed her thumb along his temple. "And now," he exhaled, "I think legacy might just be bedtime stories and tiny socks on wooden floors." She smiled. "That sounds like a better empire." He leaned back, looked down at the sonogram again. "I cried the day my father left," he said quietly, "but only once. After that, I stopped letting myself feel." Juniper's fingers threaded with his. "Maybe these babies aren't just here to teach us how to love them. Maybe they're here to teach us how to love ourselves." Walter closed his eyes, and for the first time in a lifetime, he didn't armor up. He didn't perform. He just felt. Every ache, every regret, every possibility. Later that night, Juniper placed the sonogram on the dresser beside their bed. Walter kissed her stomach. No speech, no promises, just presence. And when he laid beside her, his hand resting gently over where their children grew, his breath slowed, not because the world got easier, but because, for the first time, he did. They didn't hire decorators. They didn't call assistants or stylists or planners. They went to a small furniture shop near the lake and picked everything themselves. A crib, white with rounded corners, soft cream blankets. A changing table that Walter insisted on assembling alone, though it took him 3 tries. Juniper laughed every time he cursed under his breath, a manual in one hand, a screwdriver in the other. "You run a multinational conglomerate," she teased, "but you can't screw in a drawer slide." He looked up, smirking. That conglomerate doesn't come with tiny wheels and 86 parts labeled wrong. She sat cross-legged on the nursery floor, belly gently rising under her cotton dress. "You're doing fine," she said, and he believed her, not because it was true, but because she said it with pride. They painted the room together, soft sage green. Juniper chose it because it reminded her of fresh beginnings. Walter didn't argue. For once, he didn't need control to feel like himself. He just needed the sound of her humming off-key while she wiped paint from her cheek. At night, they read books out loud, not to each other, but to the 2 lives curled inside her. Walter's voice softened as he read about elephants and oceans and stars. Juniper laid back against his chest, one hand on her belly, the other covering his. "They can hear us," she whispered. He kissed her temple. "Then let's teach them everything we never had." They built routines in the quiet. Morning tea for her, handwritten journal entries for him, evening walks, shared playlists, long glances in the mirror as her body changed. And then, the most intimate act of all, acceptance. Walter started opening up about things he'd never said aloud. The time he stole his father's cufflinks at age 10, hoping he'd come home to look for them. The way he used to memorize the rhythm of boardroom clocks just to drown out his loneliness. The guilt of building an empire and never visiting the grave of the boy he once was. Juniper didn't interrupt. She let him shed layer after layer until he wasn't performing anymore. He was just Walter. In return, she shared her fears. Of not being enough, of loving too deeply and being left with pieces, of becoming invisible once her stomach grew full and her hair thinned from hormones. He pulled her close every time and said her name like it was the only thing that ever made sense. One afternoon they stood in the nursery, crib assembled, blankets folded, a mobile of stars gently spinning above. Walter stared for a long moment. "This room feels safe," he said. Juniper nodded. "That's what I want for them. Safety, without strings, without performance." He looked at her. "And for you?" She smiled. "I want the same." They didn't speak for a while, just stood there, together, 2 people learning how to become more than survivors, becoming parents, becoming home. That night, Juniper couldn't sleep. She reached for Walter's hand under the sheets, placed it on her belly. The babies moved. He blinked awake, startled. What was that? She grinned. "Welcome to the next 18 years. He chuckled, then grew quiet. "Do you think they'll love me?" Juniper leaned close, lips against his ear. "They already do." Silence settled. Soft, sacred. And then she whispered the words that melted everything left frozen in him. "You're not cold. You were just frozen." His eyes welled again. Not from pain, from thawing, from being seen. Fully. Finally. It started with a red envelope, slipped under Walter's office door. No signature, no handwriting, just a USB drive inside, labeled "Listen." Walter didn't flinch as he plugged it in. Juniper stood behind him, arms crossed, her body still but her pulse racing. The file opened with static. Then a voice. Alan's voice. "I told you I could get you everything. She trusts me. The entire blueprint is on his desk right now." A pause. Another voice, and the surveillance access. Alan again. "I need more time. But I've already slipped the intern a keycard. Don't worry. No one suspects a thing." The silence that followed was louder than the recording. Walter's jaw didn't clench. His hands didn't shake. But Juniper saw it in his eyes. The disappointment. The betrayal. Again. She walked out before Walter could speak. Didn't wait for an opinion or a strategy session. She just needed him. Her twin. The boy who once made shadow puppets on her ceiling when she couldn't sleep. The one who held her hand at their parents' funeral. The same boy who, somewhere along the way, forgot who he was. She found Alan in the old conservatory behind the estate, seated at the baby grand piano, tapping out the same 3 chords he always played when he was nervous. He turned as she entered. His face lit up, genuine for a second, until he saw her expression. And he knew. Juniper didn't shout, didn't cry. She sat beside him on the bench. "You were always better at piano," she said softly. Alan kept his gaze forward. "I don't know what you're talking about." She pulled out the flash drive and laid it on the keys. His fingers stopped moving. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said, voice low. "But you did. It was supposed to be temporary, just enough to leverage my position back, by selling him out." Alan turned to her. "He was never good enough for you. Cold, controlling. You deserved better." Juniper leaned in. "No, Alan. I deserved honesty. And you, of all people, should have known that." He looked away, jaw tight. "I didn't think it would go this far. But it did. And now?" Juniper handed him a small device. A recorder. Clean. Empty. "One chance," she said. "You make your own confession. To Walter, to the ethics committee, to the board." Alan's eyes flicked to it. "And if I don't?" She stood. "Then I let the system do what I refused to believe it would ever do to my brother." Alan held the recorder. It felt heavier than it should have. "Why are you giving me this chance?" Juniper's voice was steady. "Because the boy who played piano for me didn't disappear. He just lost his way." She paused, then added, "This is your map back." Later that night, she found Walter sitting alone in his office. The fireplace cast flickers of amber across his face. She handed him the recorder. His voice, his choice. Walter didn't ask what she'd said to Alan. He just pressed play and listened. Alan's voice was clear this time. Not rehearsed, not manipulated. Just raw. "Walter, this is Alan. No excuses, no loopholes. I betrayed your trust, your name, and worse, my sister. I thought I could outplay a game I didn't respect. I was wrong. This is my admission. And if it costs me everything, I accept it." The tape ended. Silence fell. Juniper sat beside Walter. He didn't speak. But he reached for her hand and held it like a man who'd learned the price of trust. Walter didn't summon him to the boardroom. Didn't call for legal counsel. Didn't arrange bodyguards or press releases. He simply walked into the sunroom where Alan was already waiting, on time, dressed in navy, shoulders squared, as if it was still a debate, still a game. Alan stood. "Before you say anything." "No," Walter interrupted, voice calm but clipped. "You'll listen." Alan's mouth closed. Walter circled once, slow, deliberate. This wasn't theater. This was war, quiet and devastating. "You didn't just leak files," Walter began. "You tampered with security, manipulated interns, lied to your sister, and exposed my private servers." Alan looked down. "I know." Walter's tone sharpened. "Then tell me, what part of that feels like love?" Silence. Just the hum of the fan and the steady click of Walter's shoes on the floor. "You think I took her from you?" Walter continued. "That I manipulated her into marriage, into this life, into this change?" Alan's jaw twitched. "I think you buried her." Walter stepped closer. "No. I woke her." Alan met his gaze now. Defiant, wounded. "She used to call me first. Tell me everything. Now I find out she's pregnant from a medical report forwarded to the estate lawyer." Walter nodded. "Because she finally has peace. That peace cost us." "It cost her everything," Walter snapped. "Her voice, her choices, her safety, and you were supposed to protect her." The pause between them felt infinite. And then, footsteps, bare, slow. Juniper entered, wearing one of Walter's oversized shirts, her hair pulled back, no makeup. All woman, all authority. "I said enough," she said. Both men turned. Neither spoke. "So she did. I love you both. But this war ends now. Not for your pride, not for your image, but for my children." She moved between them. Not fragile, not pleading, just resolved. "Alan, I know why you did it. And Walter, I know why it hurts, but I won't raise twins in a house built on your anger." She looked at Alan. "You broke my heart, but not beyond repair." Then at Walter. "You saved me, but that doesn't give you license to crush him." Neither man moved. She exhaled slowly, then added, "I want both of you at the hospital next week, when we hear their heartbeats." Alan's eyes glistened. Walter didn't flinch, but the fire in him dimmed. They weren't enemies, not really. They were just two men trying to protect the same woman, differently, and failing her in the process. Walter extended a hand. Alan stared at it. Then, after a long moment, took it. Not tightly, but sincerely. Juniper's eyes softened. "Thank you," she said, "for choosing peace over possession." That night, as she lay curled in Walter's arms, she whispered, "I don't need perfection. I just need presence." Walter kissed the top of her head and made her a quiet vow. "Then that's what I'll be." The letter arrived without a signature, typed on thick paper, delivered by hand, addressed to the Committee of National Integrity. Resignation, effective immediately. Alan was walking away, not just from politics, from the game, from the theater of pretending, from the ambition that nearly destroyed everything. Walter read it first, seated at the head of the dining table. Juniper stood across from him, arms folded, expression unreadable. "He didn't tell you?" Walter asked. She shook her head, didn't blink, didn't flinch, just stared at the page, and nodded. No press conference followed, no scandal, no leaks. Alan declined all interviews. He simply packed his bags, transferred power to a deputy, and took a one-way flight out of the capital. Destination unknown, but for once, Juniper didn't need details. She didn't ask for explanations. Just space. 3 days later, she found something on the nursery dresser. A silver box. No ribbon. No note. Inside, a pair of baby booties, hand-knitted. Tiny. Soft. In different colors. One blue. One gold. She smiled without meaning to, and sat on the edge of the bed, holding them like a peace offering. Because that's what they were. She didn't call him, didn't text, didn't send a reply or ask who made them. She just placed the booties on the shelf above the cribs, side by side. A quiet yes, a silent pardon. Walter noticed the change the same night. They were brushing their teeth side by side when he said it. "You're lighter." Juniper looked at him in the mirror, wiped her mouth with a towel. "I stopped needing revenge." He turned to her. "You never needed it." She paused, smiled faintly. "You're right. I just needed to stop bleeding." Outside, the wind picked up, autumn brushing its fingertips across the lawn. Inside, peace settled, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to be felt. Alan's face would disappear from screens, his name from headlines, but for Juniper, he wouldn't vanish. He'd just step into the background of her story, where old things rested, where forgiveness lived without needing applause, and where family meant presence, not perfection. She sat by the window that night, watching the sky, hands on her stomach, and whispered, "You'll know him as the man who made mistakes, but never again as the one who refused to learn." No podium, no headlines, no handlers fussing with microphones, just sunlight and a gentle breeze whispering through the open terrace doors. The photographer was a friend of Juniper's from art school. No makeup crew, no wardrobe stylists. Just them, Walter, Juniper, and two tiny miracles wrapped in muslin blankets. "Where do you want us?" Juniper asked, cradling one of the girls against her chest. "By the balcony," the photographer replied gently, adjusting her lens. "Where the light kisses your shoulders." Walter shifted the other baby from one arm to the next. He still hadn't quite mastered the hold, but his hands were tender now, never trembling. He wore a soft ivory shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Juniper was in a loose earth-toned dress, barefoot, curls unpinned. No power, no armor, just soul. The babies didn't fuss. One blinked up at her father with ocean-wide curiosity. The other, nestled in Juniper's arms, yawned like a kitten. "Okay," the photographer whispered, stepping back. "Just be. No direction, no posing, no script." Juniper leaned into Walter's shoulder, resting her temple against him. He angled slightly toward her, forehead gently brushing hers. Between them, the twins. Anchors. Bridges. Proof. The shutter clicked. Once, then again, and again, not to capture perfection, but presence. "Let's take one more," the photographer suggested softly. "This time, look at each other." They did. Juniper's eyes were soft, lips parted slightly in awe. Walter's gaze held steady, the weight of everything he nearly lost layered behind the quiet love he now wore like second skin. He mouthed something. 3 words. Not, "I love you." Not, "We made it." Just, "Thank you for staying." Juniper didn't answer. She just smiled. And that was enough. Later, once the babies were tucked into their cribs and the soft lull of Mozart played from the corner speaker, Walter poured them both tea. No champagne, just quiet jasmine. He handed her a cup and sat beside her on the nursery carpet. She showed him the first print from the photo session. He stared at it for a long time, not speaking, just tracing it with his eyes. "You don't look like a CEO anymore," she said, watching him. Walter glanced up. "Good." She nudged his shoulder with hers. "You look like a man I would have fallen for even if we met in a coffee shop." He chuckled. "Would you have trusted me back then?" "No," she grinned. "But I would have stared." They leaned back against the nursery wall, shoulder to shoulder, bare feet touching the rug. Not rulers of empires. Just 2 people who had survived everything and made something beautiful because they refused to let the cold win. The photo would never be published, never framed in gold. It would sit on a shelf above the baby's bookshelf, next to lullaby books and stuffed animals. And one day, when the girls asked, "Was Daddy always like this?" Juniper would show them the picture and say, "No." It was the sound of small breathing that woke her. Not cries, not hunger, just the rhythmic rise and fall of 2 tiny chests beside her in the bassinet. Juniper sat up slowly, careful not to disturb them, and reached for the shawl draped across the chair. Walter was still asleep, one arm slung over his face, his other hand open. On her side of the bed, like he'd reached for her, even in his dreams. She smiled, then stood, and walked out onto the terrace. The sky was brushed with early gold. No photographers, no press vans, no policy briefings waiting on a desk. Just morning, and the afterglow of what they'd built, intentionally, imperfectly, honestly. She picked up her journal from the table beside the lounge chair, opened to the last page, and began to write. "They always ask me why I stayed, why I gave my heart to a man who once treated it like a contract clause, why I forgave a brother who brokered my hand like a bargaining chip. Here's why. Because love is only sacred when it's chosen. And I chose." Her handwriting was slower now, less rushed, every letter shaped with intention. She wrote about the moment she saw Walter cry for the first time at the sonogram. How his coldness was never cruelty, it was armor. How her warmth wasn't fragility, it was flame. She paused to sip her tea, then continued. It wasn't the mansion, or the apologies, or the second wedding. It was the way he kissed my forehead when I couldn't sleep. It was the way he didn't flinch when I called him out, and didn't run when I leaned in. It was the way we both chose to stay, even when staying felt like a risk. Behind her, Walter stirred. One of the babies let out a tiny whimper, but Juniper stayed seated, pen in hand, heart full. Legacy isn't money. It's how we teach our daughters that love isn't possession, it's permission. It's knowing they'll never have to be forced into anything. Not a contract, not a promise, not a silence. She drew a small heart at the bottom of the page, closed the journal, and turned. Walter stood in the doorway now, holding one of the twins, hair tousled, shirt half-buttoned. "You're already writing legacy letters?" he teased. Juniper stepped closer, kissed the baby's forehead. "No," she said softly. "I'm just remembering that staying is only beautiful when you could have walked away." Walter blinked and held her gaze. Then, "Thank you for walking toward me instead." They didn't need more vows, didn't need more ink. They had the sound of 2 babies breathing, the scent of jasmine, and the knowledge that every day moving forward would be a choice. And this time, it was theirs to make. The photo still sat on the fireplace mantel, framed in soft mahogany, no glass, just exposed texture, honest light. Walter cradled one baby, Juniper the other. No suits, no guards, no titles, just laughter. The twins had their eyes open in the shot, both wide and curious, as if even they could sense this was no ordinary moment. It wasn't. It was the day the war ended. Not a political war, a personal one. Inside the nursery, a small plaque had been hung beside the door. Chosen, not claimed. Walter carved it himself. Took him 2 nights. He hadn't told Juniper he was doing it. She found it the morning after their first family photo and cried without noise. Not because it was perfect, because it was true. The final chapter wasn't about triumph, not about winning back what was lost or proving the world wrong. It was about the quiet after, the silence that followed healing, the peace that came not from domination, but from laying down arms. That evening, Juniper sat in the rocker, both girls asleep, one in each crib, a blanket draped across her lap. Her fingers traced the spine of the journal she'd nearly finished, and she reflected, softly, inwardly. So many women are told to stay, so many men are told to fight, but love, real love, doesn't demand either. She thought back to the first contract, the one Alan drafted, the one Walter signed with cold efficiency, the one that should have ended her before she ever got to begin. And yet, here she was, no longer the pawn, no longer the peace offering, but the one who had the final word. And that word was, yes, I choose you. Because she did, not once, but every day since the cold man shed his armor, since the strategist learned to be soft, since the woman who had been traded found the strength to stay, for herself, not him. She had chosen love, but not blindly, not helplessly, not by default, deliberately. And that was the moral she wanted her daughters to grow up with. That love, when chosen freely, had power, but when forced, lost its name. The babies stirred lightly, but didn't wake. Walter passed by the hallway, glanced in, caught her eyes, and smiled. She nodded. He didn't need to say anything. They understood now that no vow written in ink could ever match one written in sacrifice. That was the story, not of politics, not of empire, but of surrender, because sometimes surrender wasn't weakness, it was the highest form of strength. And to those listening, to those watching, to the woman waiting for someone to choose her, to the man afraid to open up, to the child inside all of us wondering if love is ever truly safe, Juniper leaves you with this. Don't stay where you're bargained for. Don't force what should flow. Don't fear being alone more than you fear losing yourself, because the right love will not require your silence. It will require your truth. So choose it, freely, repeatedly, bravely.